This is Taking Stock on Bloomberg. I'm Pimm Fox. All right, could the problems in Europe mean that the euro itself is in trouble? Well, it certainly seems that way. Joining us now to help answer that question is TSI Groups. That's the Institutional Strategist Group Managing Director and also their Chief Information Officer. We have Larry Jeddeloh. We also have Mark Dow, Portfolio Manager at Pharo Management. Larry, talk a little bit about what's happening in Europe right now. I mean, do we end up with parity eventually, as Mark was saying?
On euro dollar?
Yes.
We think it's possible you could have parity on both sterling dollar and euro dollar. The next phase in Europe's evolution, I think, is we'll have a problem in the UK due to a very draconian budget. You've also had now, I think, 13, 14, 15 years of no strikes by the public sector unions, and it's that sector of the UK economy that's going to have to be downsized now in order to get the budget back in balance. So we think there'll be social unrest. And London, the city of London as a financial center, is now under some attack by the EU in terms of new hedge fund regulation and alternative investment management regulation, which will cost London a lot of jobs and a lot of wealth if it goes through. So that's the next phase. And in past recessions, normal recessions, sterling dollar usually has gone to about this level, about 140. But this is different now. We've got different dynamics. So we think that will be the lead, actually, is when sterling breaks, then euro will follow.
Mark Dow, what do you think about this? Parity for the U.S. dollar versus the pound sterling because of this unrest that Larry's describing?
Well, we're in a world where you have to be willing to think the unthinkable. I do think over time we're going to see a permanent repricing of Europe.
Things are just too expensive in Europe.
That makes a lot of sense to me. There are a lot of reasons, demographic and financial, what have you. That's true. The key question is the pace over which that's going to take place. What does the path look like? And we live in a world that's highly path dependent, and the choices that the policymakers make and the way in which they implement those choices will have a profound impact on where we end up. Because if things happen fast, you tend to go further and overshoot to a greater degree and cause larger dislocations. If you're able to keep things unwinding on an orderly basis, which is what the strategy of the Obama administration is here in the United States, then you won't have to go as far to get to a new equilibrium.
Larry, come in on this topic of how orderly an unwind there might be in Europe. Because, when you talk about a credit crisis and you talk about a bond, I mean, when you stop payment, it goes from, 100 to 0 very quickly in terms of its value. Equities might be a different story because over time you get quarterly reports, you're able to analyze exactly the value of something. Is the fact that this is a credit crisis, is this one of the things that makes it so different now in Europe?
Well, I think one of Europe's problems is that culturally and the way they've organized the EU and the decision-making functions there is, having lived there, I've always been impressed by how slow they are to coordinate, to move, to look forward, and you're seeing that now. I mean, you saw, for instance, not to pick on him, but an interview of by the German finance minister this morning, who basically said markets are out of control, and then he said that a 25% profit in a real economy is unhealthy. Now, can you imagine somebody in an American economy or Canadian economy or Australian economy or Chinese commodity economy making comments like that? They have a completely different mindset as he's describing. And so my fear is that the lack of coordination, the lack of forward policy planning, and the lack of a plan, not only for political union, but for fiscal union and integrating markets, it may all come unwound here because there's simply no backup phase. There is no Bernanke, there's no Greenspan, there's nobody there who's going to stand behind it and back it up.
Jean-Claude Trichet, I mean, isn't he going to try to fashion together some kind of orderly unwind, Mark?
Well, he's a very capable administrator, and he has more crisis management experience than anybody else in Europe. But he has to decide with a lot of other people in the same room. He can't unilaterally take decisions. And the rougher things get, the more political the actions of a central bank gets. If you remember what we were doing here in the Fed, they crossed a lot of boundaries, or at least got close to crossing them, and it required.
And they could do it, or at least theoretically they could do it.
They needed political support to do it. So as you get to that threshold, it's not enough to have a capable and an experienced administrator. You need political support, you need coordination, and this is the Achilles heel of Europe for sure.
What about Larry's notion about civil unrest? I mean, we've seen these pictures coming out of Greece. Is this something that we should not be surprised if we see it in other countries of Europe?
I don't know. As I say, these things are highly path dependent, and you watch them and see how they unfold. It's possible. Is it likely? I don't know. Again, much depends on how this process is handled.
Larry, how come you haven't heard a lot from the union leadership throughout Europe? I mean, clearly you've heard it from the public sector unions in Greece, but you haven't heard very much commentary from the union leaders in other European countries.
Not yet, but I think it's coming, and I think a lot depends on the social cohesion in each individual country, as he's pointing out. For instance, in Ireland, which is now contracting its economy intentionally, we've heard absolutely nothing of this type. But I think that's due primarily to the way the culture is structured there. And I don't think you will see in Ireland the kind of civil disorder or unrest that I'm describing that I believe you will see, for instance, in London, possibly in Spain, France, Italy. And what I've been telling our people is I don't think this ends until it ends up actually in Paris.
In Paris, on the streets of Paris, on the barricades, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah. In Berlin, they'll march, but they'll march in order.
In order in Berlin. Mark, what do you make of this? I mean, if we do see those kinds of pictures, if the market does kind of see this disorder in the European Union, does that mean that we can write the euro off?
Well, I don't know. Writing it off, it's hard. It depends on what you mean by that, but it will be very, very
well, I mean, in other words, we're going to have to deal with drachmas and Deutschmarks and French francs all over again. I mean, the UK never joined the European Union.
Sure. No, I do suspect that by the time this is over, we're going to see a different membership, let's say, to the euro. I don't know which guys are going to fall out. I have some candidates clearly in mind, or at least one in particular. But again,
go ahead. Give us the hint.
Well,
which one?
It's pretty obvious. Greece has the biggest competitiveness problems because a lot of us are focusing on the debt because that's very visible, and it's true we've been mispricing credit risk in Europe for quite some time. But if you were to solve that tomorrow and give them fiscal space, they still have a competitiveness issue, and that's going to take a long time to deal with, and you really can't do that without your own monetary policy and your own currency.